Hi guys, I just wanted to talk briefly about how water can be useful during periods of fat loss. There's a general recommendation to consume more water. No one really knows how much water people should consume, and I think there's obviously, if you look at people's different physiologies, different biochemistries, there is a large variety, there is a large variation amongst people about how much water they need. But I think generally, if we look at the population in Western nations, in developed nations, we can come to some conclusions. And one of those is that people possibly don't drink enough water. Now, one of the biggest problems with not drinking enough water is that your body will tell you that you're thirsty, and you may be tempted to consume other beverages that, for example, have sugar in them. If you consume more water, you are able to turn off your thirst, and therefore I think you are much less likely to consume sugar-laden beverages. And I think that's one of the most overlooked reasons why consuming more water is actually good for you. It actually limits the consumption of certain other drinks that may actually contribute to weight gain. But there is a little known fact about water, that it is actually able to increase your metabolic rate. Studies have looked at water and the effects of energy expenditure, and generally they've shown that consuming cold water actually increases your metabolic rate. Now, studies have attempted to measure this, and there is variation in the studies reporting this, but generally one study that I can think of off the top of my head was a study that looked at consuming water at 4 degrees. They gave it to healthy individuals, and then they measured the energy expenditure, and initially there was a reduction in energy expenditure that lasted for about 3 minutes, but after that the energy expenditure of the subjects increased, and by 24 minutes there was an increase in energy expenditure equivalent to about 1 kilocalorie per minute. And that lasted for the entire recording period, which was up to 60 minutes. So for about 40 minutes after energy expenditure became elevated, it remained elevated, and they actually stopped measuring at 60 minutes, and therefore we don't know what happened after that. But it's about a kilocalorie per minute increase that they measured. And that would be, that's significant. If you consumed water throughout the day over your course of your lifetime, that's a considerable amount of energy. Why water causes this increase in energy expenditure is not really fully understood. It may be something to do with the temperature of the water. If you consume cold water, your gut is instantly exposed to cold temperatures. There may be a homeostatic regulatory mechanism that causes the gut to obviously warm that water, and therefore the body compensates for the loss of heat by generating more heat and therefore wasting more energy. So that's possibly the reason that water causes an increase in energy expenditure. So really, this is quite a short video. If you're trying to lose body fat, if you're, you've made some changes to your diet, if you haven't looked at the amount of water that you consume, I think that's something that's worth looking at. If you consume too much water, obviously that can be detrimental because it can flush electrolytes from your body. But generally, I think people do consume too little water throughout the day. I mean, the recommendation is to consume around 8 glasses of water, and for some people, I think based on body size, for smaller people that might be too much. But if you're consuming enough liquids in the form of water and say tea as well, and you don't feel thirsty, you are probably consuming enough water. I think really this is something that you're going to have to experiment with yourself. But if you increase your water intake, there is evidence that it will increase your metabolic rate, and it should also prevent you consuming other drinks as well. Now, another interesting thing about water is the way that water can be delivered. If you drink plain water, there is an increase in metabolic rate. If you aerate drinks, so in the case of water, that would be carbonating them. If you drank, for example, carbonated water, you can aerate other drinks as well. For example, you can aerate milk by putting it in a blender, and that creates a kind of a foam. If you aerate drinks, these drinks stay in the stomach for longer, and this has an appetite decreasing effect. In other words, it increases satiety. Now, the reason for this is possibly because it increases gastric volume, and there is also an inhibitory effect on gastric emptying. and therefore you have the liquid staying in the stomach for longer. And it's the stretch receptors on the stomach that are activated, and these feed back into the central nervous system to say that there's food in the stomach or liquid in the stomach, and this turns off appetite. So aerating drinks, drinking carbonated water instead of flat water, and drinking, if you have, for example, a smoothie, you will naturally aerate it with your blender. But if you aerate drinks, generally, there is research to show, there is good evidence to show that this also has an appetite regulatory effect. Now, obviously, relating to water, that means consuming carbonated water, which you can buy in bottles. You can buy carbonated water quite cheaply from supermarkets now. If you're going to increase your water intake and you don't mind consuming carbonated water, that might be a way that you could also control your appetite. So I hope that was interesting. There's a number of different ways to look at water. You can look at it from a health point of view, or you can look at it as a weight loss tool. Really, it should be looked at both. It does have these very beneficial effects, but most importantly, in terms of your intake of fluids, try and avoid all those drinks that you know you shouldn't be consuming. If you have tea, you shouldn't really be adding sugar to it. If you consume drinks other than water or tea, try to limit the intake of those that contain sugar and those that contain metabolic poisons. So I hope that was interesting. If you have any comments about this video, please leave them in the comments box below, and as always, I will try to get back to you as soon as possible, and I'll see you next week for another video. Take care.